After Hurricane Ophelia hit Ireland last month, I thought I'd share a few thoughts I've had about climate change, hurricanes, and food growing. I've been trying to learn more about extreme weather events in general, as they can have such a negative impact on food production throughout the world and in my own gardens. As part of this, I've been keeping an eye on the development of hurricanes in the North Atlantic. These extreme weather events are both fascinating in how they form and develop, and traumatic with the destructive wake that they can leave behind. And with the mindset and experiences of a grower, I'm looking for signs of climate change having an impact on these systems. This 2017 season has been a tough one, with Harvey, Irma, and Maria all becoming seriously destructive natural disasters. Based on a measurement of its energy throughout its life cycle, Irma was the second strongest storm observed in the Atlantic Basin since 1950, when more accurate observations from satellites began. The accumulated cyclone energy of all the storms in 2017 hurricane season have earned this year the dubious distinction of being hyperactive. A lot of this was from the huge storms that made headlines, but it was also due to the fact that 13 storms in a row reached hurricane strength with winds exceeding 120 kilometers an hour, a streak that has not been seen before. But while 2017 has been notable for a number of reasons, it could be argued that all of this is within the scope and range of what has been observed before, and therefore difficult to determine the impact of climate change, if any. But I felt that Hurricane Ophelia was different, and I wonder if it could be the sign of something new. This storm began in an area in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean where not many tropical cyclones form, and those that do start in this region seem to head west or stay in the middle of the ocean and eventually stall. But as this storm strengthened into Hurricane Ophelia, it was apparently caught by the meandering mid-altitude jet stream that brought it straight for Ireland. Ireland does occasionally experience the remnants of hurricanes, but normally after they've circled up along the coast of North America and then made their way eastward to Ireland as significantly weaker storms. The path that Ophelia took was much more direct, and on its way it became a major Category 3 hurricane with maximum sustained wind speeds of 185 kilometers an hour. No hurricane of this strength has ever been seen so far east in this part of the ocean before. It was probably the worst storm to hit Ireland in 50 years, with sustained winds above 100 kilometers an hour experienced along much of the south coast. The entire country was affected, though not as badly as it could have been, as the storm weakened just as it made landfall. Thankfully, there wasn't too much local damage, and the polytunnels of the Red Garden survived, barely. Was this something that is infrequent enough, but still within the scope of what could be expected, or was it an outlier event? Given that so few storms start in this part of the Atlantic, it's hard to determine how rare any particular behavior would be. Are we unlikely to see a storm like this for another 50 years, or are these type of events going to become much more common? Or does it have the characteristics of something different at a fundamental level? When a big hurricane hits, we commonly hear that while we should expect the frequency and intensity of events like this to increase, we can't be sure that any individual storm was caused by climate change. I've got a big problem with that answer. In complex adaptive systems like the climate or an ecosystem or the soil biology, searching for that linear path between cause and effect can be misleading. On the one hand, claiming that this storm was caused by climate change would be like me claiming that the great crop of carrots that I grew this year was caused by the really strong seed that I started with. Yes, the seed produced stronger seedlings than I've seen in the past, and the crop was the best one that I've grown, but to claim that this was cause and effect would neglect the other variables, such as good weather conditions and my improving skills as a grower. But of course the strong seed helped, or rather I'd feel it would be foolish of me to claim that the strong seed had minimal or no effect. I also think that it's unhelpful to assume that just because I don't know the extent to which it contributed, I can't make any claims about the impact of the seed quality. It seems that this is what we tend to hear about the impact of climate change on hurricanes and other extreme weather events. A fascinating factor of hurricanes in the Atlantic is they cannot form until the ocean surface temperature rises above 26 degrees Celsius. In other words, there can be a lot of storms regardless of the temperature of the water, but this particularly destructive type of storm cannot form or be sustained until the conditions have passed a certain threshold. I think this idea of a threshold is interesting, and I've experienced it very directly in trying to grow squash and pumpkins in Ireland. While I've always wanted to grow squash, it can be very difficult in the weather conditions here. A key factor is that squash, like tomatoes, need to ripen to a certain point or they just aren't the same. They don't develop the ripe flesh or strong skin for storage. They need a certain amount of heat and for a certain number of days to grow and ripen in the gardens, conditions we just don't get most summers. Relatively cool weather compounded by the threat of frost means that it is difficult and sometimes impossible to produce ripe squash even with the fastest and hardiest varieties. Most seasons, the conditions are below what I would call the squash threshold. Below this threshold, I feel that growing squash is a serious waste of effort and space, but above this threshold, an abundant, delicious crop can be grown and stored. What I find interesting is that here in Ireland it doesn't take much to push the conditions beyond that boundary. By starting the plants in a hotbox and using fleece to provide the warmer microclimate for a few weeks after transplanting, I've been much more successful at producing ripe squash at the end of the season. It seems to only take a few degrees of extra warmth in the first part of the growing season to bring the microclimate conditions beyond the squash threshold. For me, this is a useful way of thinking about what is going on in the gardens, and I wonder what other thresholds there could be out there. I also wonder if it's possible that the unusual path and strength of Hurricane Ophelia is not just that of a rare event, but the sign of a threshold being passed. Are conditions changing so that storms like this can more frequently develop and become significantly stronger in a part of the ocean where they just haven't been able to exist before? Could a new weather pattern be emerging, or have I got all of this wrong? In a few decades, Hurricane Ophelia could be seen as the beginning of something that became much more common, or it could remain a storm that fits within the possibilities that have existed for many centuries. I suspect the former is more likely, and I wonder what to do about that possibility. Storms that we used to expect once every 50 years, or more accurately had a 2% chance of happening in any given year, are possibly going to become much more frequent. This is what the theory and models of climate change tells us is likely, and what my experiences in the garden leads me to suspect as well. But we already get a lot of storms in Ireland, and developing windbreaks and more resilient infrastructure within and around the gardens is a prudent thing to do. And to what extent can I really prepare for an extreme and rare event like a hurricane, beyond perhaps being more aware and continuing to work to become a better grower? While I am conscious of the need to adapt to a changing climate, including the possibility of much more extreme storms, I feel that my Red Gardens project and this YouTube channel could be part of the process of mitigation. I firmly believe that the more people who grow food for themselves, the better chance we have of limiting the extent of climate change. That's a big reason why I'm doing all of this. So thanks for watching. If you like what you see, please subscribe, and if you'd like to support me in this work, please click on this link to my Patreon page. Any contributions will help me make more videos like this.